indirectly, I take credit for the last 2 championships.
But, you know, someone of my age has to go back and talk about the good old days of the NBA and your decision to leave college basketball and decide in 1998, you know what? Phil Jackson, you know, people consider him one of the greatest coaches of all time. Michael Jordan, you know, he's leaving. He's considered one of the greatest basketball player of all time. Scottie Pippen, arguably the greatest defender of all time. Dennis Rodman, in contention with the greatest rebounder, pound for pound. They all leave Chicago, and Tim Floyd, yeah, that's the team I want to coach. What was that sales pitch like?
Well, it really went on for 10 years. It went back from 1988 to 98. Jerry Krause had approached me after a game at the University of New Orleans and told me, you're going to be my next head coach, and introduced himself. And I thought, yeah. But he started calling, and it went on for like years. And I really wasn't sure that that's what I wanted to do. I was a college guy, you know, and loved it. But anyhow, my wife asked the same question, you know, why would you do this? And because the model had always been find a place that's down, you know, do a little better, and you're going to be able to keep your job and do a little better. And maybe you get an extension. You can stay employed till you're 60-something. And this one obviously went against the model. And she asked me, she said, why would you do this? And I told her, I said, well, I want to be the next Phil, you know. And she said,
oh, without Michael, though.
And she said, well, you can't be the next Phil Jackson. I said, I'm not talking about Phil Jackson. I said, I'm talking about Phil Bingston. And she said, who's Phil Bingston?
Yes.
And I said, that's the guy that replaced Vince Lombardi, and nobody's ever heard from him. You know? So, but and that's kind of how it worked out, you know. But no regrets. Really, you know, kind of thankful that Jerry Reinsdorf gave me that opportunity. We still talk. You know, most guys do get whacked. You know, Coach Nurse just won a championship at Toronto, gets whacked. And
so, is it Reinsdorf or Krause that's recruiting you for 10 years?
Well, it was Jerry Krause, and you know, he always had the next coach in mind. The day he hired me, he had the next coach in mind, and I think in his thinking was that this is going to end at some point. You know, we're going to win our championships, and he wanted a college guy to go develop pros because the league was going to get younger. And we were the first team to go young. Everybody was old in those days. But when they blew the team up, Garnett and Kobe had just come out. So it started
out of high school.
Yeah, right out of high school. So it started this influx of high school guys going. And Jerry Krause's way of thinking, the old guard NBA coaches had not had to develop guys. They'd stay in college for 4 years. 2 years later, they decide if they could play or not. So he felt like we're going to take 18-year-old guys and just try to get them better, which is what we had, 18-year-old guys. But and some of them were good players and became great pros. Unfortunately, I wasn't around long enough to coach those guys. But it led to a job with the Hornets after that, and then to Southern Cal, and just kept moving around.
Hearing that story, because I'm literally wondering, like, what is the sales pitch? And he's selling you a vision of where the NBA is going, and it probably does make a little sense. Like, okay, you're coming straight out of high school, Kobe, Kevin Garnett, that group. And so I could see him selling the vision like, hey, development is going to be more part of the NBA. College coach saying, yes, I can do that. The other side of the deal, though, is like you're replacing a legend in a squad that had just won 6 titles in 8 years, and the only 2 they didn't win, Michael was playing baseball, and all the talent was leaving. I mean, how much trepidation did you have? I hear you joking about your wife to some degree, but you weren't concerned?
Well, you know, what actually happened, Jerry Krause wanted to blow the team up a couple of years earlier. The year they beat Seattle, before the last two titles against Utah, I had a college player named Irvin Johnson, same name as Magic, who was starting center for Seattle next to Sean Kemp, and Hersey Hawkins was on that team. And he said, we're gonna end this year, and I want you to come up and meet our owner, Jerry Reinsdorf, in Seattle. And so I went up there and walked around downtown. He said, if anybody asks you why you're here, it's just to see your old player, Irvin Johnson. So we walked around downtown, and he said, what are your thoughts on this, Jerry Reinsdorf? And I said, I think it's too early. And I said, this team is the Beatles, and I think it needs to die its own natural death. And then, maybe at that time, be ready to come in. So he said, would you tell Jerry Krause that? So we had a three-way at the end of that year.
What year is this?
This is 1996.
Gotcha.
2 years before it ended. So we had a three-way, and it was back and forth, and Jerry Krause wanted to go ahead and end it then and still get value in Jerry Krause's way of thinking for those players if he moved players towards the end of their careers, and he could then get draft picks and other players to start the rebuild. He didn't want to become the Boston Celtics, which those guys had ended their careers, and there was nothing left at Boston when Rick Pitino went in. So Jerry Reinsdorf, to his credit, said, no, we're not going to do that, and we waited 2 more years. So indirectly, I take credit for the last 2 championships. Okay,
You were helping.
I didn't get a ring. Or anything,
you were helping them see the light. But
yeah, and then the same thing happened the next year, and then at the end of the next season when they beat Utah the first time, same conversation occurred, and then that led to Jerry Krause and Phil deciding before the season started what became the last dance. That Phil said, this would be his last year, and the blow up of the team.
And so it sounds like Jerry Krause just was outsmarting himself and or had some personal problem with Michael and Scotty and just wanted to move on from it.
No, I think Jerry really wanted to win championships. He in his way of thinking, he really believed that was the time to get more players, more assets for the next rebuild, and that maybe they were at the end. But Michael's will, Scotty's talent, you referred to Rodman. And even when I came in there, they had the lockout that year, and the talk became, Michael, we're going to bring Michael back, and if we're going to bring Michael back, we're going to bring the rest of them back. And Michael was in a contract year; they were all in contract years, but it just didn't happen. I was hopeful that I was going to have an opportunity when they started that season in February, only 52 games, to be able to coach all of those guys, but it didn't work out.
Oh, so your original thought was that the old guard might still be there.
Well, it wasn't going to be, and then because of the lockout year, it looked like maybe for 52 games that maybe we would have them for a year, but the decision was made. And Tex Winter was the old architect of the triangle offense, and I think Tex, in his mind, really believed that they could win with the triangle, and Jerry Krause believed that, regardless of who you plugged into it. But as I proved as a head coach, you needed more than the triangle, and we ran the triangle because that's what Jerry Krause wanted to do, but it wasn't enough. You needed players in that triangle.
Like what you saw? Hit that like button, subscribe, and check out the full episode by clicking the link below.